All right, back on Young Turks, Cenk, Anna, and David Day, an executive editor of the American Prospect, has joined us. David, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I'm going to give you tons and tons of updates here, guys, and then we'll talk about whether we should be nervous or not, okay? So Biden somehow still clinging to a 0.2 lead with 83% reporting in Florida. We'll come back to that if it gets interesting. Wait, hold on, it just flipped. Donald Trump has now, just as I was speaking, taking the lead for the first time in a while now, 49.6 to 49.4 in Florida with 85% reporting. So we'll see if Biden can recapture the lead, but right now, Trump now up in Florida, okay, and looks very good for him. Now, let me give you the latest results here from a great number of states. So Donald Trump has won South Carolina. He has won Alabama. On the other hand, Joe Biden has won Delaware. Joe Biden has won Connecticut. Joe Biden has won Illinois. Donald Trump has won Mississippi. Donald Trump has won Tennessee. Joe Biden has won Maryland. Joe Biden has won Massachusetts. Joe Biden has won New Jersey. But Donald Trump counters with Oklahoma. I'm telling you this in rapid succession because all these states were already locked in. They're very red or very blue. In fact, that leads me to one of the bluest states in the country. Joe Biden has won Rhode Island. Okay, so none of that is surprising so far. But let me also give you more results that are not just the presidential race, okay? We have, these are also under the category of not surprising, but I wanna let you know. Chris Coons has won re-election in Delaware. He is one of Biden's friends and close associate in his campaign as well, and a fellow senator from Delaware. Dick Durbin has won re-election in Illinois. That is not surprising. These are all in the Senate. Ed Markey, who had a very tough primary challenge from Joseph Kennedy III, Ed Markey was the more progressive candidate there. He did win that primary and now has won the general election easily as expected. Cory Booker is reelected in New Jersey. Governor Chris Sununu, Republican, is reelected in New Hampshire. That's unfortunate. On the other hand, Jean Shaheen, otherwise not known as Mean Shaheen or Mean Jean, she's not known as either one of those, but she's a Democrat, or not but, because she's a Democrat, and she has won re-election in New Hampshire. The most, perhaps out of all of these unsurprising results, perhaps the most unsurprising, Jim Inhofe has won his election in Oklahoma. He'll be going back to the Senate, unfortunately, probably filled with snowballs. Jack Reed has won in Rhode Island. He'll be going back to the Senate. Bill Hagerty has won in Tennessee. John Carney has won in Delaware. And those are all the least surprising things you've ever heard. Now, finally, a result that, while not surprising, is still unfortunate, and this one will sting a little bit. Mitch McConnell has won re-election in the state of Kentucky and will be going back to the Senate. Yeah. So all that money given to a moderate Democrat who we were told by Chuck Schumer had the best chance of winning that election, and it's called instantly. It turns out no chance at all. And so she has lost and Mitch McConnell has won, and the Grim Reaper heads back to the Senate. All right, before I give more results, David, let me ask that question that I alluded to in the beginning. Any reason to be worried yet?
I don't think so. When I looked at this race earlier this week, I didn't really have Florida on my radar as a Biden state. I think that if you look at where Biden has been successful, it's been with working class whites, and then where he's been somewhat unsuccessful, it's with Latinos. And really the one place in Florida where he's running well behind Hillary Clinton is in Miami-Dade County, and that's with Latino voters. I think that the really interesting state to look at right now is Ohio, where in Mahoning County and in obviously Cuyahoga, but Lake County, Lorain County, Lucas County, the white blue collar areas that places like where the Lordstown factory was and where the Chevy Cruze was being built. And Donald Trump said, "I'm bringing your jobs back. Nobody move from Lordstown." And then, nothing happens and they close down the facility. Ohio is very, very interesting right now. Biden is winning those counties. He has a measurable lead right now, and there's about 30% or so of the vote in. That's really one to watch. Trump won Ohio by 8 or 9 points in 2016, and Joe Biden is someone that we knew was going to relate well to older voters, to white voters in the northern part of the country. And him doing well in Ohio probably means something about how well he's going to do in Pennsylvania and in Michigan and in Wisconsin. So if you're looking for something that is hopeful from a Democratic perspective, it's definitely Ohio right now.
I have one other that's hopeful. Now, I'm going to give you numbers that are going to confuse you a little bit, but we will explain. So first of all, with 34% reporting in Ohio, Biden has a 15-point lead. Now, again, this is not a normal election. In a normal election, I'd almost call that, because that's such a giant lead with a third of the numbers reporting. But this is not a normal election. They could be counting mail-in votes first, and Biden had a huge lead in mail-in votes. And New York Times does not have a number for a percentage chance of winning there. We told you earlier, New York Times has Florida with Trump 95% chance of winning, and 86% have already reported. Trump only has a 0.7% lead, but they take into account other factors, exit polls, and what other information they have access to. So which leads me to the interesting results. Trump with a 4-point lead in Georgia, and New York Times has him at a 78% chance of winning Georgia. So now, that's obviously not good news for Biden, because it seemed like Biden might have a real shot at Georgia. On the other hand, I'm not too worried about, and you could almost be slightly encouraged that Trump only has a 78% chance of winning Georgia, which now we're getting real south, right? And he's, of course, that's where the strength of the Republican Party is. Georgia's a different situation because of Atlanta, and you know how close elections sometimes can get there. Obviously, with the Kemp-Abrams election that happened, that was so close. But here comes the most interesting. North Carolina, only 1% reporting, but New York Times must have information we don't have access to, because Trump has a 26-point lead in North Carolina, but they're saying that Biden has a 66% chance of winning. Now, if you're new to politics, again, you're going to be freaked out by that. You're yelling hoax throughout the House. If you're on the right-wing side, you're trying to call your friend to figure out what QAnon conspiracy happened in North Carolina. No, it's about access to exit polling and mail-in ballot information, etc. 1% reporting is nothing, or it's actually less than 1% reporting. So that 26-point lead for Trump means absolutely nothing. And as you've seen tonight, as you've seen in all of our election coverage, we tell you if Biden had a 26-point lead with less than 1% reporting, that would also mean nothing. As we told you earlier about Biden's lead in Florida not meaning much or anything at all, and now he's losing in Florida. But if the New York Times information is accurate and Biden's really got a 66% chance of winning North Carolina, that could come close to ending it right there. So I'm not going to take the New York Times word for it. We want to have more percentage reporting before we get too excited about that. But David, yes, let me kick it over to you again.
I mean, I think the North Carolina projection is really largely based on pre-election day polling, which showed Biden with a small but consistent 2 to 3 point lead. So we'll see when the bigger numbers come in, but we're not talking about 1% of the vote in when you're talking about Ohio. This is 40% of the vote, 40% of what's expected to be in. in the books in Ohio, the estimated vote total, and Biden's got a 56-42 lead. It's really interesting, and obviously all caveats apply. There's going to be wild swings, blue mirages, red mirages, what have you, throughout this night. But from where Biden is factoring in compared to where Hillary Clinton was in 2016, I think it's pretty significant. And what's more significant is that how it looks in Ohio is probably going to be indicative of how it looks throughout the Midwest.
Yeah, so there's also apparently encouraging numbers coming in from Indiana, even though Trump has obviously won Indiana, but it's encouraging in the patterns that they're seeing in the Midwest. Let me give you a little bit more details on the numbers in Ohio. It's now 57-42, a giant 15-point lead for Biden with 34% reporting. Again, if it was a normal election, that would be very indicative. In this election, it's a positive sign, but you can't get too excited about it because of the mail-in situation. Right now, as things stand, Biden has, this is not at all important, even though Biden has a lead here in the New York Times forecast of Electoral College. Biden has 85 and Trump has 55. So Biden's winning by 30, but so far, no important swing state has been called. So that number is largely irrelevant. We're just having fun and updating you on the score. But that's not a score that matters, even with Biden leading by 30. Okay, I want to just remind you guys of a couple other things that we're doing that are fun too. If we get to 100,000 concurrent viewers, which I think we're really close to between a couple of YouTube channels and Twitch and all the other platforms that we're on, we're going to release a shirt. But I don't, given that Trump's about to win Florida, I'm not sure I want to release it yet because it's an anti-Trump shirt that has certain assumptions. Okay, so we'll see. We'll hold that in our back pocket. Come on, North Carolina. Anyways, and obviously, guys, if you can chip in at tyt.com/go, that's what allows us to have 13 hours of election coverage for you guys today. That's what allows us to bring in all these wonderful progressives together. Ryan Grimm is on in the next hour. Ben Mankiewicz is going to join us later. Nina Turner, Jamal Bowman, Kara Eastman, Mike Siegel, Julie Oliver, and the list goes on. So this is headquarters for progressives, and obviously when we have updates on those races, we'll let you know about the important Senate and House races as well. So far, just two, and there's a little bit of controversy on something that we reported earlier. So I say two because Mitch McConnell got called, but Paula Jean Swearingen's race was called. And she's saying online, guys, you called it with 0% reporting. Okay, I get it, as David was alluding to earlier, you're making assumptions based on earlier polling that you have, but let's let a couple of votes come in and see how it goes. And I think that's probably a fair request. So we reported that call earlier, but I think it's very fair for Paula Jean to say, hold your horses, let's see how it turns out. Ava, yes, Anna, go ahead.
So in the Senate, in Georgia, looks like Perdue is up so far with 15% of the votes in. He's up 13%. And Perdue is a Republican, of course.
Yeah, so Perdue is the guy who got shellacked by Ossoff in that last debate and then ran and decided not to do the final debate because he was too scared. And he had that great look on his face like, as Ossoff was listing his crimes and his incompetence, etc. But that doesn't mean that Ossoff's going to win. He was still an underdog going in. On the other hand, Democrats might pick up the other seat in Georgia. That's a much more complicated race. I'll kick it over to David on that in a second. But I'm going to keep reading you guys' comments throughout, and we'll have some of them down below in the ticker as well. Ava's just joined through tyt.com/join. She says, just became a member, which I should have done long ago. I'm with you guys all night over in Colorado. My stress is through the roof, but watching is keeping me sane presently. Keep up the great work.
Also, real quick,
yes.
level 3 hype train on Twitch.
Oh, so I still don't know what a hype train is and what the levels are, but it sounds super fun that we're on a level 3 hype train. Can I see level 4? That's a literal question. I don't know if there is a level 4. All right, one more comment before we go back to the results. Joe Bridges says, been around since 2007. Many of my life stones mirrors yours, marriage, family, career. Proud to be here with you guys at the end of all things. Well, Joe, I hope it's not the end of all things.
Right.
But we are, if Trump wins, yeah, you might be unfortunately correct. So we'll see how that goes. One more shout out to a sponsor as we go. Aspiration.com/TYT. Aspiration has been so great. They also plant trees. They also round up. They plant 10 trees when you sign up. And they don't put your money into any fossil fuels. I love that companies are going in this progressive direction. We should support them and they support us, so it's a win-win. Aspiration.com/TYT. Unfortunately, we have to take another break here, but when we come back, I want to explain to you the second Georgia Senate election because it's important, and obviously we'll have more updates, including some good news that is supposed to be on the way and I believe will arrive soon. So we'll be right back. All right, lots of big news for you guys. Cenk, Uygur, David Day, and Anna Kasparian with you guys on election night. And good news, bad news. Let's start with the bad news. Decision Desk HQ has called Florida for Trump. I am not calling Florida yet, but I'm not sure that that is relevant, whether it's on both counts. Me calling it is not that relevant. And whether Trump wins or not in Florida is likely not that relevant. But that is the bad news. Now let's move on to the good news. In Ohio, with 42% reporting, Biden's still with a 12-point lead. And more importantly, Delaware County, which is a Republican stronghold, is coming in for Biden. Now that's actual good news because that's specific context to not just, hey, I can't tell if it's mail-in ballots, I can't tell which county it's from. No, that indicates that Biden is actually swinging Ohio. Doesn't mean he's gonna win it, okay? But there's a much better chance that he wins Ohio now knowing those details. And there's a better chance that he wins Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, and most importantly, Pennsylvania, if this is how that region of the country is going, and it looks like it is going in that direction. So we'll keep you updated on that. And remember, Biden has to win basically just one of the swing states that are in doubt. I don't think Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin are in doubt. But Ohio, Florida, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Arizona were in doubt, Georgia in doubt. And so Biden has to just basically win one, okay? If it's a little bit more complicated than that, but not much. So then that leads me to North Carolina, where with 55% reporting, Biden has a 13-point lead. So if you got freaked out over Florida, if North Carolina and Ohio get called for Biden, it's over, and Biden's president, and we're rid of Trump. So here comes a hope hype train, or maybe just a hope train. By the way, for those of you following along at home, we did actually reach level 5 hype train on Twitch. And apparently you max out there, everybody arrives at their destination. You got there so quick, they go, okay, congrats. So a super strong Twitch audience, and we love you guys for it. And I'll read one more comment here because it's a fun one, and then I'll kick it over to David for an explanation of Georgia, and you guys have thousands of great comments. But from our member section, Amos Coso Jr. writes in, first time watching election live, and my son just asked, why do I have to watch the same thing on my computer and live TV? I responded with TYT is our truth and TV is the other people's truth. That's a really interesting way of putting it. The good news is, by the way, our truth is the actual truth. We do it in numbers, in math, science, logic. We believe in all those things. And as you saw in 2016, even if things are not headed in the right direction, we don't ever fudge the facts. You gotta level with people and tell them exactly what the reality is. Unfortunately, a lot of not just the Fox News and the right wing, but a lot of the mainstream media have their own biases and that are built in. Not necessarily an agenda, that's debatable, but certainly a giant establishment bias that's built in. That's partly why they didn't see Trump coming in 2016, And they didn't see Bernie coming in the primaries either, but if you were watching the Young Turks, you did see that coming. All right, and by the way, if you wanna be a member, you hit the join button below on YouTube. On Twitch, if you have Amazon Prime, it doesn't cost you anything to be a member, but we do get the revenue. So that's a great win-win, so please do that. And if you could join in other ways, that'd be great too. Actually, before I go to Georgia, Anna, you have an update?
Yes, so Justice Dem Marie Newman, I apologize, is projected to win in Illinois' 3rd district.
So it's excellent. So we're gonna get a bunch of Justice Democrats that are gonna win. We're gonna announce Jamal Bowman soon and Cori Bush soon. But Marie Newman is on the board. She's going to Congress. That's 8 Justice Democrats now. I was led to believe that we couldn't get one. It's funny how that's working out. All right, David, break down Georgia for us.
Yeah, so there are 2 Senate races because Johnny Isakson, who was previous senator, retired, and Kelly Loeffler took over for him, so she's having a special election. That election is kind of like the way primaries are done in California, where you get to vote for anyone on the ballot, and then the top 2, provided that nobody gets 50%, the top 2 advance to a runoff that's going to be on January the 5th. Another thing that happens in Georgia is that if nobody in even a general election gets 50%, that goes to a runoff, and in this case, it'll be on January 5th. That's likely in the Purdue Ossoff race because there's a libertarian there that's expected to get a sufficient number of votes such that nobody will have 50%. So it's very likely that you could see 2 Senate elections in Georgia on January 5th. You know, the Senate begins the next session on January 3rd. So we might, you could have a 49-49 Senate with 2 Georgia races outstanding. As for who's going to likely advance to that top 2 in the special, it's Reverend Warnock, the Democrat, Reverend Raphael Warnock from Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. And then there's this dogfight between Loeffler, who's the incumbent, and Doug Collins, who's the head of the House. He's the ranking Republican in the House Judiciary Committee. They are in a pretty pitched battle over who's more pro-Trump. And so one of them will go to that runoff with Warnock. But we could also see an Ossoff-Purdue runoff in January as well.
Yeah, that Loeffler-Collins fight is a perfect picture of the Republican Party. Loeffler is the most establishment Republican you'll ever see. She's basically a giant donor that they handed a Senate seat to because she gave so much money. It's insane. And Doug Collins is a rabid right winger. So in the same school of thought as Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz. So pick your poison, the corrupt or the crazy, and usually both. So that's what we're contending with in Georgia. And obviously, once Warnock gets to the runoff, we're hoping he's going to knock out either of those folks. And by the way, there was a small chance that Warnock might have won without a runoff. I never really thought that was too possible, but some Democrats were hopeful of that. But Joe Lieberman's son entered the race as a moderate Democrat and siphoned some votes away from Warnock, and then made it impossible. So thank you, Lieberman family, screwing over progressives and Democrats for several decades running now. We appreciate it. Okay, now back to the heat of the action here. I'm gonna read you some numbers that are just for fun. Pennsylvania, 3% reporting, Biden with a 65-point lead. But to give you a sense of how meaningless that is, Trump with 2% reporting in Michigan has a 12-point lead. Both of those numbers mean nothing. So let's move on. Biden's not gonna win Pennsylvania by 65 points. Now here are numbers that are relevant. North Carolina, Biden still with 62% reporting, sitting on a big lead, 53.9 to 44.9. So that's basically 54 to 45. It's a 9-point lead with 62% reporting in North Carolina. If Biden wins North Carolina, the election is not called, but it's right there. It's almost called. So that's how important North Carolina is. Anna, did you have more updates?
Yeah, so Biden has in North Carolina, according to the New York Times, Biden has a 7-point lead now with 65% reporting. But the New York Times forecasts that Trump has a 66% chance of winning that state.
Wow, that has swung. That's swung a lot. That's right. Wow. Okay, so that is not good news in North Carolina all of a sudden. Before you go on to more results, David, does that make you nervous?
Well, we're going to have to see. I did think that Biden had a measurable lead in North Carolina in the polling. It was pretty stable. So I wouldn't be shocked if Trump nipped him at the end, but it would be a little bit surprising. There's this northern tier that we don't have a lot of information about, except for Ohio right now, and that's sort of I think the if you're the Biden team, that's the story right now. Is how well is that going to hold up in Ohio, and is that going to be extended out to that what was called in 2016 the blue wall, those states that were locked in allegedly for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, so this is frustrating. I'm sure that there's a real reason for it. It's not some sort of agenda or anything like that, but. In Ohio, with 44% reporting, Biden has exactly a 10-point lead. That's where the Democrats are very excited. But for whatever reason, as they tell you the percentages in Florida, which turned out to be is so far true that Trump did have a good chance of winning, and they move the percentages from Biden with a good chance of winning to not in North Carolina, they don't have a percentage chance of Biden winning in Ohio. So that's why that 10-point lead with the mail-in vote situation becomes harder to predict if it's a real 10 points or not, and if it's going to swing back or not. Just two quick calls here in the non-surprising category. Donald Trump has won Arkansas, and Tom Cotton has won re-election in Arkansas. He's of course a Republican there. He's one of the guys who's going to Iowa and South Carolina and those states already, game planning for Trump losing, in fact, to be fair to him, or winning this time, it doesn't really matter. And he's planning on running in 2024. He's a terrible guy on policy, loves war, wants to bring back the Republican Party. It combined a noxious form of Trumpism with the horrific neoconservatism. So, if you think Ted Cruz is bad, he is, but Tom Cotton ain't any better. So watch out for that guy. Okay, if you guys have more updates, jump in. But meanwhile, I'm going to read one more comment here. Ash Cash Bagash. Oh, so you got one? Go ahead, David.
I can come in with something that's pretty interesting. Pennsylvania, we had this issue where they couldn't start counting the early vote, or at least preparing the mail-in ballots until 7 o'clock this morning. Montgomery County, which is outside Philadelphia, kind of a Democratic stronghold, just reported its early vote, and it was 74,000 for Biden and 8,000 for Trump. It was 89-10 in that early vote. Which is another example of how much different the composition of the electorate was in that early period relative to the election day vote. That's an incredible set of numbers.
Okay, I got a number that I'm definitely encouraged by. Ohio now up to 49% reporting, and now Biden is pulled up to a 12-point lead. So unless these numbers are coming in from completely Democratic areas and completely from mail-in voting, that's a hell of a lead to have with half of the vote reporting. So if that holds true, you don't have to worry about Florida, North Carolina, or anything else. That means
the important thing is what you were talking about, like with certain counties that are coming in blue, like Delaware County. Delaware County has not gone for a Democrat since 1916. and it's showing blue right now. This is the Columbus suburbs. And what we knew is that suburban voters was going to be this. It was a swing in 2018. You saw cities, suburban districts in like Oklahoma City and Charleston and Salt Lake City go to Democrats. Seeing a number like that in Delaware County or in Hamilton County, home of Cincinnati, but which also has a lot of outlying suburbs. Right now, with the early votes, 69-29 for Biden. Those numbers make me think that a lot of the things we thought about this election do seem to be coming through. Even if the Latino vote seems to be moving a little more towards Trump, particularly in South Florida.
So what we're seeing play out there is what people were talking about right before the election, that Trump was picking up a surprising number of Latino votes and getting a little bit better with African American vote, but Biden was picking up a lot more white votes and eating into Trump's base of non-college educated whites. Trump still had a big lead there, but less so than 2016. Most importantly, the suburbs that David was just talking about, seniors, Catholics. So Biden picking up more of those white voters leads to two different results. One is, at this point, there's still more white voters in America than minority voters. So if you're Biden and you're exchanging white voters for minority voters, just as a matter of pure math, you're in better shape and you would take that trade all day long. Do not do it as a matter of ideology and don't structure your policy around it. But electorally, that's a good thing. But the second phenomenon that's really important is, what state are we talking about? That's why you're seeing such disparate results here of, wait, why is Trump winning in Florida, but Biden has got a big lead in Ohio, when we thought it might be the reverse, that Biden had the lead in Florida and Trump had the lead in Ohio. Well, it's because of these demographic shifts that we're talking about. And we're gonna have to keep our eye on that and see if, and we also have to see it in terms of, is it a shift that's just specific to Biden and Trump? Or is it more of a trend for Republicans and Democrats? Because if Democrats could put Ohio back in their column in the long term, that would be nearly decisive, and that would be huge. But of course, yeah, go ahead, David.
I mean, the bigger issue would be if that comes to pass in places like Texas and Georgia. You are seeing similar issues with suburban voters in those states. Cobb County, which is likely to go to Biden. This is Newt Gingrich country. Clinton won it by 2 points, a pretty thin margin, with about a third of the vote in Cobb County is something like over 60% Biden. Williamson County, which is a fast-growing county outside of Austin in Texas, it looks like Biden is going to win that. Beto O'Rourke won that county in 2018. So this is a decided shift that's nationwide, no matter the state. And you even see it in Florida, just not in South Florida. But Biden picked up counties like Duval and Pinellas that Clinton did not. There is a definite shift. It's not clear yet, as you said, Cenk, whether or not it's just for this election, just because of revulsion to Trump, or indicative of a broader shift. But Texas, I think, is still a very interesting state tonight, and so is Georgia.
Yeah, and guys, also the way that the demographics shift throughout the country, throughout all these different elections, are so interesting. That's why I started talking about the Reagan-Carter matchup in 1980, where Carter won West Virginia, but Reagan won California, New York, New Jersey, et and now we're in a situation where it just keeps on shifting. And if we could hold Latinos better, then, and you hold the suburban white vote, oh my God, then you win Ohio and Florida and Georgia and maybe Texas. So that's the coalition we got to bring together if you're the Democratic Party, and that would require some degree of unity with progressives and moderate establishment, corporate Democrats, whatever you want to call them. Can we have that unity? That's for the end of the night when we start talking about, after we know the result, what happens next. But I promised a couple of comments here. Let me read those real quick. Ashkash Bagash said, today I was supposed to study, but knowing that TYT had live coverage, I could not get away. I've learned to be a true progressive from TYT. It makes a difference. Thank you so much. So happy to be watching this with my TYT family. We're happy to have you, brother. And if you hit the join button below, if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're watching anywhere else, tyt.com/join. And especially those on the website, I read their comments more often. Brandon Ritz, the Rizzer, writes in, just became a member, long overdue. You, Anna, and John have inspired me to become more active, and I'm considering running for office. Mediocre Dems need to go. We need to move the party to the left. I love it. Ben Anna Pi Cenk wrote in, are Democrats taking any seats from Republicans? Do we have a blue wave? Hold, because we're about to get to that. We're gonna get to it. And as we go to the break here, guys, remember tyt.com/go. You power us. And tonight's an incredible night, 13 hours of coverage. You make that possible. So please check out tyt.com/go and chip in if you can. We'll be right back. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk, Anna, and David Dane with you guys. Man, these are nerve-wracking nights. They really are. This one was supposed to be easy, and well, I tell you, it's at the end of the night when it's all tallied up. If Biden runs the table in the Midwest, it will have appeared easy in hindsight. But as we're in the middle of it right now, it doesn't look easy. So Trump has a greater than 95% chance of winning Florida. Some have already called Florida. Let me give you more bad news before I turn to the good news. Biden, again, all these situations are unusual because of the mail-in voting, has a 5-point lead in North Carolina with 70% reporting. Normally that would be fantastic news. But in this case, New York Times says Trump has a 76% chance of winning North Carolina. And in Georgia, with only 26% reporting, Trump has a 13-point lead, and New York Times says he has an 84% chance of winning that. But now let's go to the good news. Anna, tell us about Pennsylvania.
So based on what the New York Times is reporting, Biden has a massive lead in Pennsylvania so far. Keep in mind that 10% reporting, and Biden's at a 31-point lead. So that's pretty massive. That's definitely a good sign. So we'll see how it goes.
So David, let's go to Pennsylvania now. We touched on it earlier, but we haven't really dove into it too much. In Pennsylvania, arguably the most important state in this election, because Trump's got to have it to win. So it's only 10% reporting, but how encouraged are you by a 31-point lead?
Well, that's early vote. Pennsylvania has been a pretty secure 4 to 5 point lead. There would have to be a polling error of around that for Pennsylvania to go to Trump. I know there was a lot of activity, a lot of organizing. You saw Biden crisscross the state, Biden and Harris on Monday. They've spent a tremendous amount of time there. I know they've done a lot of organizing. We had a great piece over the weekend from one of our writers, Marcia Brown, about a Facebook group called Pennsylvania Women for Biden-Harris that has 124,000 members, all organizing. And it's almost like a support network for women who some might be in conservative areas of Pennsylvania, who maybe their husbands or their fathers are conservative, and they go there for support. I know that people have been working their hearts out in Pennsylvania, and I can't say very much about what the early vote shows, because we know that these universes of who votes early and who votes later are completely different. But I know that you cannot say, like you said in 2016 with Hillary Clinton never went to Wisconsin. You can't say that about Pennsylvania. She was Joe Biden was intimately focused, and the Biden campaign was intimately focused on Pennsylvania this entire election.
Yeah, and folks, so when people talk about polling, everybody knows that it could. There's two different theories. The folks who believe in polling say polling could, of course, always be off by 2 to 3 points. There are extraordinary circumstances where folks got some things wrong on a big scale. The example I always use is Michigan primary in 2016 on the Democratic side, where Bernie Sanders was supposed to lose by 18 but won by 2. So that's extraordinary. And I think the number one problem that they were doing in 2016 was relying too heavily on likely voters rather than registered voters. And that in the past would have made sense, but it was really throwing off the polling with Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump bringing in so many unlikely voters. A lot of the polls have adjusted for that now. So I'm in the camp that they could be off by a couple of points here and there in 2020. There's the other camp which says, no, polling is nonsense. The only one I believe is Republican polls, and they have Trump winning when no one else does. I don't know what to do with that. And I know that there's some on the left who also don't believe in polling at all, partly because that they were shell-shocked by what happened in 2016. But if you were watching the Young Turks, you weren't shell-shocked. And so, and remember, it's more complicated than this because the swing states varied much more wildly in 2016. But at the national level, the polling said that Hillary Clinton was supposed to win by 3, and she won by 2. So there you have it, a normal 1-point swing in a poll. And Trafalgar, which is in my mind a totally trash poll by the Republicans, that they bragged got some of the swing states right in 2016. Well, nationwide, they were off by 5. They thought that Trump was going to win by 3 and he lost by 2, the popular vote. So that's context for you guys. And so I tell you that as a prelude to, I need you to remember that polling could be off by 3 in different states in opposite directions. So it could be that polling's off by 3 in Florida, and that decides it goes from Biden being up by 1 to Trump winning by 2. But in Ohio, let's say that it's off by 3 and it was about around tied, then Biden wins comfortably. Or maybe it's even off by more in Ohio. We don't know that yet, but we've got encouraging signs. So it's not as simple as, are the polls off and that means either Trump is doing better or Biden's doing better. No, it might depend on the state. I'm gonna read a comment from one of you guys because we do this show together and your membership makes all the difference to us. Jason said, my girlfriend Ashley and I both just signed up for $10 a month membership at tyt.com/join. Longtime watcher, and I got her hooked on the channel. Love you, sweetie. How sweet is that? They're not just talking to us and we're not just talking to them, they're talking to each other.
Aww.
Okay.
We bring people together here at TYT.
Is that what we do? I guess. I guess that's what we do. All right. So Anna, any further update? Wait, I have one. We moved 1 point in Ohio, 51% reporting, and now it's 54.1 to 44.7. So still holding on to about a 9.5 point lead, a little over 9 point lead for Biden in Ohio. If that holds, that would be terrific news. Indiana just got called, so Donald Trump wins Indiana. I would have thought that it would have gotten called earlier. Unsurprisingly, Governor Phil Scott has won in Vermont, but if you don't know, you might be surprised because he's a Republican who's won re-election as governor of Vermont. On the other hand, Phil Scott is the only Republican governor that went on the record today and said, I voted for Biden. So, interesting mixed bag there. So yes, Anna.
In the Senate, Kelly Loeffler seems to be up by 0.6% with 29% reporting. If she wins that election, I mean, remember, she didn't get elected into that Senate seat. If she wins the election, though, it would be pretty sad. I mean, she's this giant Trump loyalist. Her husband is the head of the New York Stock Exchange. I genuinely believe that she engaged in insider trading based on a Senate meeting that basically gave her all the information about how serious COVID was. And then she proceeded to downplay the virus publicly while all these suspicious trades were happening behind the scenes, with stocks and everything. So I don't know, we'll see. It's a tiny, tiny lead, but I'm very curious to see how that Senate race turns out.
Yeah. Well, that'll go wrong. I mean, Loeffler won't win tonight. She would have to, if that holds, she would have to go face probably Reverend Warnock in January.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Cyber God 09 with a very generous contribution on Super Chat. We appreciate it. Thanks for keeping the news honest, guys. Well, thank you. You helped make that happen. And don't forget tyt.com/go. And don't forget our great sponsors, including twostrongcoffee.com/TYT. They give to Rebellion PAC, Justice Democrats, Wolf PAC. That is unheard of. So it's organic, it's fair trade, it's progressive in that sense. And everybody, including a bunch of people who emailed in today, says on top, it tastes fantastic. So twostrongcoffee.com/TYT. We thank all of our sponsors for making this coverage possible, including you guys. So I'm gonna read one more comment from you all in the member section. Os Gravy writes in, thank you TYT for providing an alternative to corporate media. Let's remember that no matter the results of the election, we still have a fight ahead of us. Mutual aid, direct action, and solidarity forever. Much love. Right there with you, brother. And actually, I'm gonna do one last one. Corge Likely C says, it's nice to hear David's commentary and analysis again, joining our standard bearers. Thanks, TYT. Well, thank you for coming on, David. David, we got a minute left. What was your, I'm curious, in the tyt.com/pool, what was your electoral college prediction?
I believe I had 322 to 216 for Biden. I had him winning Georgia and North Carolina, but not Florida. And then I did not have him winning Ohio. And I had him with the other Midwestern states and Arizona. I think North Carolina, we still don't know a whole lot about North Carolina. That's mostly early vote. And we'll see what happens in Georgia. Fulton County still is yet to be counted fully. This is shaping up to be a night that's going to take a little bit of time before we really get a real sense of what's happening. And everyone wanted Florida to be in the bag, so it was an early night, but we're not going to get that.
Yeah, and so far at least we know it's not an early night. David Dane, executive editor of American Prospect. Everybody check out American Prospect. They do some great work there. And speaking of progressive standard bearers, we go from David Dane to Ryan Grimm when we return. He's the Washington bureau chief of The Intercept, of course, and a TYT contributor. We've got more updates for you guys. I'll give you one last one before we go. 52% reporting now in Ohio, and Biden holds a 9-point lead. Much more updates when we come back. Like and share the stream. We'll be right back. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.